The Lifestyle Show, presented by Selina MacKenzie.
So, in Overcoming Financial Trauma, How to Break Free from Guilt, Build Wealth and Redefine Success, award-winning financial therapist Rahkim Sabree delivers a deeply honest and supportive discussion of how to get to the root of your financial trauma. He joins us now. Welcome to the show, Rahkim.
Thank you for having me.
Financial trauma, financial stress. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we?
Absolutely.
And you say it's not just about money, it's about lived experiences?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So financial trauma, trauma in general is often kind of viewed through a mental health lens, right? It's just like, oh, this is something that happened to you, and so this is your reaction to it. What a lot of studies are pointing to in the world of trauma now is that trauma is also a body response, right? So it lives in your body. There's a somatic component to it. So my background's in finance, and many of my colleagues in the financial space, particularly in the advising and planning space, often look at just the numbers, right? Why are you not budgeting? How close are you to your goal for retirement? Are you overspending? But there's not a lot, or not enough, I should say, emphasis placed on what drives those behaviors based off of that lived experience, right? So what are the things that you observed or heard or experienced directly throughout your life, especially in childhood, that influence what you might be doing with your money today?
Okay, so you're a bit like a financial therapist, I guess.
Well, that's exactly what I am.
That's great. We need some financial psychology. That sounds good. Can you help individuals as well as organizations then?
Absolutely. So I think the first step when we're talking about overcoming financial trauma is giving it a name, right? The shared language that I've contributed to the body of work through this book helps people and organizations in identifying, what do we call financial trauma? How do we define it? How does it show up? Where does it show up? And what can we do about it? Some feedback that I've gotten around kind of my positioning of financial trauma is that it may feel discouraging that this idea of financial trauma doesn't just go away with like a magic pill, right? Trauma rewires your brain. And so in the act of rewiring your brain, you have to become conscious first of like, what are these triggers? How does that show up in my life? And you can take control of additional rewiring through practices like affirmations or engaging with a financial therapist. And somatic healing, I think, is a huge part of this too, where you can kind of work through the metabolization of that trauma in your body.
And what is your 3E framework?
So the 3 E's are exposure, education, and execution. I came up with this through my lived experience and just kind of like layered on some of the research that I've done in the space around financial trauma and just, money management in general. But exposure is exactly what I just shared, right? It's naming a thing, it's becoming aware of a thing. So we have language to describe what financial trauma is or that financial trauma exists. That's exposure. Education is kind of getting an understanding of how is this showing up in our nervous system? How is this showing up in our body? How is this showing up in our brain? How do we respond to the real or imagined threat associated with money in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response? And of course, the role of financial education or financial literacy is a big part that falls into that category. And then the last D is execution, and that is doing the work, right? That is either engaging with a financial healing professional, whether that's a financial therapist, a financial counselor, a trauma-informed financial planner, and then actually implementing the steps around what it is that you've learned throughout that process.
Okay, so you mentioned you can help people budget, you can help people plan like for the future with pensions and things. How can you help somebody who said, well, I literally have got more going out than I have coming in?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask this question because most financial leaning professionals or financial professionals, period, will look at that issue and they say, well, you have a spending issue, right? Or you have an income issue. You need to go out and need to make more money. And these things can be true, but they're often not existing in a vacuum, right? If we look at the cost of living anywhere in the world, right, and in comparison to what it is that we're generating by way of income, more likely than not, we're in this pattern of trading our time for money, right? And so you get an hourly wage rather, or maybe your salary, and there is like a dollar amount equivalent to per hour of what you're making. And we start to internalize that messaging as this is what I'm worth, right? And sometimes when we start to tangle our self-worth as an individual with our net worth, what is that we own, or our income, if we lose that income, that can be a kind of a fracture in our identity. Or on the other side of that, we're constantly chasing more income so that we can feel better about who we are because we have made these associations. So going back to your example, if somebody is putting out more than they're bringing in, I'm going to look at not only the numbers, what are you spending your money on, but why are you spending your money on the things that you're spending your money on? In some instances, the cost of living is just so high that the income that you're making needs to be supplemented or augmented with more high income. In other instances, people use money for different things. People use money for power. People use money to feel free. People use money as a response to feeling burdened. And so they may be excessively spending on, whatever their vice is, right? Because they're trying to solve a problem that is not a money problem, but has financial implications.
Yeah, I totally get you. I had a friend years and years ago, and she was very much a shopaholic, and she would be just her normal self. And then if we went out and she went to buy some clothes or whatever, her whole demeanor would change. You could see that she was an entirely different person. She got such a high, and she hardly wore any of these clothes that she bought. She just put them in the wardrobe. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. It can fill a need that you're not getting from somewhere else, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, when we go shopping, there is that dopamine that's triggered and using money in the same way that, we may get from, being affirmed, being acknowledged, being viewed as important or powerful, experiencing affection. I mean, this is a normal human reaction that has unfortunately become very commoditized, right? So another part of kind of like my thesis in discussing financial trauma is that, these issues are not personal failures. These are systemic issues. And when we look at how advertising and PR is weaponized against most people, right, in terms of, how do the industry and the PR space tie products and services to the way that people feel, right? A lot of these purchases, a lot of these financial decisions that we're making are made on the basis of our emotions and not on the basis of our logic. So we may know, hey, I'm not bringing in enough money and I'm spending too much money, but we may not be able to stop ourselves because we're chasing that desire to regulate our nervous system, or we have that dopamine dependence.
I know that a lot of supermarkets put their sweets and chocolates near the checkout, don't they, so that the children will ask for them. It's very clever marketing.
That's not an accident, right? And even more so, a lot of supermarkets will track your spending behavior through their club cards, right? So like they'll give you the discounts because you're using their cards or you're using their app, but they're gathering data so that they can make predictions around how you're going to spend money next, and then put the thing in front of you so that it's almost as if you don't have a choice, right? Because your brain is responding to, these patterns that these organizations, supermarkets, what have you, are capitalizing on through advertising, through marketing placement. All of those things are by design.
Yeah, it's very, very clever marketing and advertising. And on the other end of the scale, we said about the dopamine, when people go shopping, some people have immense guilt, don't they? They know they can't really afford something, but they want to treat their child or they want to treat themselves or a loved one. And the guilt and the shame that comes with it can be immense.
Absolutely. So the guilt and the shame are definitely characteristic of financial trauma. It does not necessarily have to be synonymous with financial trauma. But what I've seen and certainly what I've studied is that those feelings of guilt and shame often arise because of the misalignment of values and behavior, right? So I love the example that you used, especially around the holidays, right? We just came out of the holiday season, Christmas time, parents want to buy their children gifts. And a lot of times children accidentally, I believe, are socialized into viewing the act of gift giving from their parents as an act of affection or an act of love, right? And so when we're making these associations around, especially in childhood, whether or not my parents love me because they were able or they were unable to get me, the shiny red fire truck or whatever the thing is, that puts a lot of pressure on the parents, right? Because they don't want their children to feel like they don't love them. But this continues to exist in the other areas of our relational interactions as well, right? If we have partners, even if you have coworkers or a boss, right? Like I've been in situations certainly in a previous life, right, working where my coworkers would go around and, gather up money so that we can collectively offer our boss or manager a gift. But if you're struggling financially, how are you kind of navigating that idea of contributing or abstaining from the contribution and the guilt that's associated? Like, well, everybody contributed, but this guy, right? And so guilt and shame are very real things. I think the way to address those things, going back to my original point, is we have to be in alignment from a values perspective with those behaviors. We have to establish financial boundaries. And so being able to say, this is what it is, and this is how I intend on moving forward with my money. And also we just have to socialize, right? Money has such a taboo attached to it. Yeah. And so a lot of times people are struggling in silence.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like a very interesting and very helpful book for our listeners. It is called Overcoming Financial Trauma, How to Break Free from Guilt, Build Wealth and Redefine Success. And it's by Rahkim Sabree, who we're chatting to now. And as always, we are selling it on our website, TRE.radio. Rahkim, do you have a website as well?
I do. So it's my name, RahkimSabree.com. And it'll point to mostly my speaking services. So that is how I get the message out there, right? I do a lot of speaking, keynotes, workshops, etc. for organizations. In the past, I did one-on-one financial therapy sessions. This year, I'm kind of just focusing on the speaking and selling of the book. So the book is definitely up there. And if anybody's interested in a speaker on financial trauma, I'd love to talk.
Well, you have the best voice for speaking. I can tell you that. You've got a very lovely voice.
Thank you.
So thank you for an interesting chat, and you take care. Thanks, Rahkim.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.